Hey guys, it's Shaylin and I'm here today with another writing video. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about emotional stakes. I think emotional stakes is one of the most important writing concepts that is not talked about. We talk about stakes, but I don't think we talk specifically enough about emotional stakes, because in so many cases, I think emotional stakes are what truly give the story that impactful emotional punch. We've probably all heard about stakes, which is what a character has to lose within a story. But there's I think, more important subset of stakes, which is the emotional stakes. This isn't just what the character stands to lose tangibly if they fail, but what they stand to lose emotionally, the emotional pain or consequence they will suffer. So using emotional stakes in combination with external stakes makes a story so much more impactful. If you've ever read something and thought, I just didn't care, or I didn't have any reason to care about the protagonist, or what was the point of that? It may be because there weren't any emotional stakes. A story can have an amazingly structured plot with really clear external objectives, but without emotional stakes, it's hard for a reader to feel invested. A simple way to think about it in a lot of cases is external stakes are what I want from the character's perspective, and the emotional stakes are why I want it. But I think it can be a lot more complicated and nuanced than that, and in a lot of stories, the most interesting emotional stakes happen when the external and the internal stakes are actually contradicting. It depends. Sometimes they're in unison and the emotional stakes are like a support that give the external stakes meaning. But in other cases, they might be contradictory, which creates this need for sacrifice, which is so emotionally compelling. Personally, I like to think of emotional stakes as the bargain. So the emotional stakes are the hurt that the protagonist is bargaining with as they pursue their goal and desire. I think there are a few ways this could manifest, but I've laid out 3 possible ways that I think are the main ones. The first one I like to call is reason. This basically breaks down to, I need external goal because it is tied to emotional goal. So if I fail, I will suffer emotional stakes. The second I like to call risk. So this breaks down to, I want external goal, but in order to achieve this goal, I risk suffering emotional stakes. So I am gambling with this potential emotional fallout. Or it could also be reversed. I want emotional goal, but risk losing external stakes. So I am gambling with possible tangible fallout in pursuing this emotional goal. And then the final setup I call sacrifice. So this kind of breaks down to, I want both an external goal and an emotional goal, but they contradict. If I achieve the external goal, this will come at the cost of emotional stakes, but if I achieve emotional goal, this will come at the cost of external stakes. So let's look at some examples. I have one example for each type here. For the first one, for reason, this is kind of the example that I've written out. Angelica's goal is to climb Mount Everest because her dad was a mountaineer and this was his life's goal, but he died a year ago. His dying request was that she go there to scatter his ashes. They had a tumultuous relationship and she feels like she failed him by never living up to his expectations, and this is the one way she can redeem herself. Therefore, her reason for her external goal, climbing Mount Everest, is to honor her father. And if she fails, she will feel that she was unable to accomplish the one thing her father ever wanted from her, and since he is dead, this is the only way to retroactively repair the relationship. For risk, this, I couldn't really come up with one, but I recently read the book Big Swiss by Jen Beacon, and I think it is the perfect example of a risk type of emotional stakes. So in this book, the protagonist, Greta, is a transcriber for a sex therapist, and she lives in just kind of a state of depressed apathy, but she ends up becoming obsessed with one of the clients, who is a married woman, and she begins pursuing a relationship with her when they have a chance encounter, and the protagonist recognizes her voice. Obviously, if it's discovered her true identity, and it's discovered that she has literally been listening to this woman's therapy sessions, the woman she's having an affair with, there will be a huge amount of shame from everyone around her because of the multiple levels of immorality within this relationship. But because the affair makes her feel something, it makes her want something, which she hasn't really felt for such a long time, she takes that risk, even though as the reader, we know eventually it's going to fall apart and she's going to suffer huge emotional fallout. So the final example is for sacrifice. Lisa's goal is to help her family, who recently lost everything in a house fire. Her parents were injured in the fire and have huge medical debt, and her siblings are very young. Therefore, none of them are able to work. However, Lisa has a secret girlfriend who lives on the other side of the world that her family doesn't know about and wouldn't approve of. We hate homophobia. Before the fire, Lisa was planning on leaving everything to go marry her girlfriend so they could live happily ever after. Either she lives with the guilt of failing her family and has to live knowing that they will likely never recover from this fire, or is unable to be with the love of her life, so she must sacrifice one outcome. As you can see, that one can really tear the heartstrings because the sacrifice is gonna hurt no matter what. So how do you raise the emotional stakes? How do you create emotional stakes. So the first way is with relevant backstory. Backstory that has emotions that are relevant to the present external stakes can create really strong emotional stakes because the character has past wounds that are reflected in the present. And this makes the present emotional stakes feel higher and more potent. I think an amazing example of this that I'm going to use because it's very currently relevant in pop culture is The Last of Us. I'm guessing a lot of you guys have seen it because wasn't it HBO's like most viewed show ever? Joel's external stakes in getting Ellie to the Fireflies is that she's immune, and this is a chance to save humanity. The funny thing is that as the viewer, we almost don't really care about that. What we care about much more is the emotional stakes, which is his need to protect and take care of Ellie because he was unable to save his own daughter. And as their relationship becomes stronger, as he stops resisting past wounds and kind of lets himself heal through this relationship, the emotional stakes only rise because this relationship means more to him and also to Ellie and also therefore to us. If Joel didn't have a backstory where his daughter had died, these emotional stakes would not nearly be as strong. We can see through the story that this is his chance for both healing and redemption from the death of his daughter, Sarah, who he wasn't able to protect. And so the potential emotional fallout here is huge. This relationship between Joel and Ellie is the emotional center of the story. It's why we're invested in the story, right? It's a great example of how emotional stakes take huge narrative precedence over external stakes, even in a story where it's literally a zombie apocalypse, so the external stakes are very, very high. The choice to have Joel have lost a daughter in the past, to be honest, is an extremely obvious writing choice. It's because it's such a good one, right? Like, you just couldn't tell the story without that, even though it's a fairly obvious backstory choice. Like, it's obvious because it's so good. It's a very clear example of emotional stakes and how we attach more to the emotional stakes than the external stakes, even when the external stakes are huge. So the second way that you can raise the emotional stakes is through the side characters. Side characters also have emotional stakes. Their potential emotional fallout is being bargained with both by their own choices and actions, but also by the protagonists. So you can really up the emotional stakes not by just considering the emotional fallout the protagonist will go through, but also how they're bargaining with other people's emotions as well. This can put the character at a very compelling moral crossroad. I think the setup from Big Swiss is a great example of this. The main character, Greta, is bargaining with her emotional stakes and emotional fallout, but she's also bargaining with the emotional fallout of the woman that she's having an affair with. This woman doesn't know the extent to which Greta is bargaining with her emotional stakes, but she is. And it creates much more textured morality, which leads to the final point, moral crossroads. Testing your character by putting them in situations that truly test them can make some of the most impactful moments in the story. Will a character do the right thing at the cost of their own emotional fallout? Going back to The Last of Us, because I think I think emotional stakes are the reason why this became the most watched show in HBO's history, is because of the way this show, and I mean obviously the game before it, I haven't played the game. Sorry, not a gamer, but I think that it's a story that just knows how to use emotional stakes properly, and I think that's why it struck a chord. So in the last episode of The Last of Us, Joel has to choose between the external goal of a cure for the literal zombie apocalypse and his emotional goal of protecting Ellie. He's put in a situation where he can't have both. He has to pick save humanity or save Ellie. We understand as the viewer why he picks save Ellie, because that was the emotional goal. Also, going back to the fact that his daughter didn't die because of a zombie infection. She was killed by a person. Had she been infected and died that way, maybe he would have had more emotional stakes related to the cure. But that's not what the cause of the loss was. It was a human being who killed her. It really ties into the emotional stakes in a way where he doesn't save humanity, but he saves her, and we understand why that choice was made because of the emotional stakes that were established. I just want to say as a final note, simply presenting the reader with tragedy is not enough to create emotional stakes. We've all read or seen countless stories that feature loss or tragedy, and most of us have experienced some kind of loss or tragedy within our own lives. So merely presenting sad things isn't enough to create emotional stakes, and if you go too heavy-handed with it, it can start to become very melodramatic. The goal isn't always to have the most extreme emotional stakes all the time. There has to be a genuine and specific reason why the tragedy being used to bolster the emotional stakes is important to this character in this narrative, beyond just the fact that it exists. There has to be a reason why the choices made regarding the emotional stakes are specific and important to this character. Just putting them there isn't enough. It has to be tied in like a genuine, specific way. If your goal is just create the most intense emotional stakes possible by packing in as much tragedy as possible, that can lead to a lot of melodrama. Think about stories you've read that maybe had really intense emotional events and people died and stuff, but you just didn't really care. It's probably because there was no specific reason why that emotional event was creating emotional stakes for this character. Just the presence of tragedy isn't enough. There has to be reason, is my final PSA. But I think that the things before that I talked about can be used to create reason so that you actually are getting the most impact possible out of your emotional stakes. So that is all for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I just hope that this quick video and quick chat on emotional stakes can help you make your writing more emotionally impactful. I'll leave links to some other related videos that I've done in the past, one on conveying emotion through your writing and one on like character relationships, because I think those can all tie into this idea. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!